Have you ever stared at a jar of store-bought pickles and wondered why they sometimes taste like soggy, salty disappointment? We have all been brainwashed into thinking that making real, crunchy pickles requires giant wooden barrels, dark cellars, and weeks of waiting around for fermentation to happen. But that is a complete lie. Today, we are breaking all the rules, and I'm going to show you a ridiculously fast and simple recipe for pickled cucumbers that takes just 10 minutes of active work. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will possess a secret technique that delivers an explosive, fresh crunch that no supermarket brand can ever match. It is so easy, it almost feels like cheating. But tell me the truth. Do you actually perfect the neon green ones from the store? Or are you ready to taste what a real cucumber is supposed to taste like? Let me know what you think as we get started. Before we dive into the exact steps, we need to understand a little bit about what we are actually doing. For thousands of years, humans had to figure out how to keep food from rotting before the invention of the refrigerator. Ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia were soaking cucumbers in acidic brine way back in 2400 BC. They used a slow fermentation process where natural bacteria produced lactic acid over many weeks. But we live in the modern world, and we do not have time for that. We are going to bypass the bacteria entirely and use a direct vinegar brine. This method is often called making refrigerator pickles. It relies on the power of acetic acid to instantly preserve the vegetable, lock in the bright green colour, and infuse aggressive, delicious flavours in a fraction of the time. It is the ultimate culinary shortcut. So let us start by talking about the star of the show, the cucumber itself. You might think you can just grab any random cucumber from the grocery store shelf and turn it into a crisp masterpiece, but that is a massive myth. Slicing cucumbers, those long, dark green, waxy ones you put in everyday salads, are terrible for this process. They have thick, bitter skins and are absolutely packed with excess water. If you try to pickle them, you will end up with a sad, soggy mess that bends like a wet noodle. What you really need are pickling cucumbers, often called Kirby cucumbers. These little guys are short, stout, and covered in little bumps. Their skin is thin, allowing the acidic brine to penetrate quickly and deeply into the flesh. Plus, their interior is dense and dry, which is the absolute secret to holding on to that glorious crunch. Imagine biting into a crisp, fresh apple versus a soft water balloon. That is the exact difference between using a proper Kirby and a regular salad cucumber. Finding the right produce is your very first step to success, and it is a perfect illustration of how one tiny detail changes the entire recipe. Always look for firm, bright green cucumbers without any soft spots. Now we need to address the magic liquid that makes this all happen, and that is your vinegar. The type of fingerprints you choose will completely dictate the final flavour profile of your quick pickles. A lot of people believe you have to use expensive, fancy vinegars, but that is simply not true. Standard white distilled vinegar is actually the absolute best choice for a classic, sharp, deli-style pickle. It has a clean, neutral flavour that allows your spices and garlic to shine through without any muddy undertones. It also keeps the brine crystal clear, which looks beautiful in the jar. However, if you want a slightly sweeter, fruitier, and more mellow flavour, apple cider vinegar is a fantastic alternative. Some chefs even like to do a 50-50 blend of both. Think about the difference between a sharp, bracing glass of lemonade versus a mellow apple juice. That is how the vinegar affects your cucumber. The most important rule here is to check the label and make sure your vinegar has an acidity level of at least 5%. Anything lower than 5% will not preserve the cucumbers properly, and you will lose that signature acidic bite. Let us talk about the water you are going to mix with that vinegar, because it is surprisingly crucial. It is a common myth that any water from your kitchen sink is perfectly fine for cooking and pickling. But if you use hard tap water, you might be setting yourself up for failure. Tap water often contains chlorine, fluoride, and high levels of minerals like calcium and magnesium. These minerals can react with the natural compounds in the cucumbers and the salt, leading to a murky, cloudy brine that looks extremely unappetizing. Even worse, heavy minerals can actually interfere with the pickling process and soften the vegetables. If you want perfectly clear, professional-looking jars, you should use distilled water or filtered water. Imagine looking at a beautiful snow globe that has dirty, cloudy water inside. You would not want to display it. The same goes for your pickles. Taking that extra step to use pure, clean water ensures that your brine remains sparkling clear and that no strange chemical flavors interfere with your carefully chosen spices. Moving on to the absolute backbone of flavor, which is the salt. You cannot make pickles without salt, but grabbing that blue cylinder of regular table salt is a terrible idea. Table salt is loaded with anti-caking agents to keep it flowing freely in humid weather, and it also has added iodine. If you use iodized table salt in your brine, those anti-caking agents will instantly turn your beautiful liquid cloudy, leaving a weird white sediment at the bottom of the jar. Even weirder, the iodine can react with the garlic cloves and turn them a bizarre shade of bright blue or green. While it is completely safe to eat blue garlic, it looks absolutely terrifying. To avoid this culinary disaster, you must use pure pickling salt or kosher salt. These salts are 100% pure sodium chloride with no additives whatsoever. They dissolve perfectly and keep everything looking natural. Think of pure salt as a clean window, letting you see exactly what is inside the jar, while table salt is like a frosted, dirty pane of glass. Always read your salt labels before you start making your brine. Now it is time to bring the noise, with the essential flavorings starting with garlic. Garlic is non-negotiable in a classic dill pickle recipe, but how you prepare the garlic drastically changes the outcome. A lot of people just toss whole, unpeeled cloves into the jar, hoping for the best. That is a mistake if you want big flavor in a short amount of time. Because we are making a quick recipe that is ready in just hours or days, we need to help the garlic release its oils immediately. You want to take your knife and give each peeled clove a firm smash with the flat side of the blade. This breaks the cell walls and releases a compound called allicin, which gives garlic its sharp, spicy kick. Smashing the garlic is like turning up the volume dial on your stereo from a 2 all the way to a 10. If you want it even stronger, you can slice the garlic thinly, which increases the surface area exposed to the vinegar. Just remember that the longer the garlic sits in the acid, the more mellow and sweet it becomes, rounding out the sharp edges of the vinegar. Next up in our flavor profile is the legendary herb that gives these pickles their name, fresh dill. Do not even think about reaching into the back of your pantry for that dusty jar of dried dill weed you bought 5 years ago. Dried herbs simply do not pack the bright, grassy and floral punch required for this recipe. You need fresh dill, and ideally, you want the whole plant. The feathery green leaves are great, but the absolute best flavour comes from the dill stems and the flowering dill crowns, if you can find them at a farmer's market. The stems hold massive amounts of essential oils. When you pack your jars, you want to aggressively twist and bruise the dill stems before shoving them in. This acts as a physical illustration of releasing flavour. It is just like muddling mint for a mojito. By crushing the herb slightly, you wake up all those aromatic compounds so they can instantly infuse into the hot brine. A generous handful of fresh dill will transform your kitchen into an authentic New York deli in a matter of seconds. Let us talk about the secret spices that add complexity and background warmth. You need mustard seeds and whole black peppercorns. Mustard seeds add a beautiful, subtle tang and a tiny bit of heat that you feel in the back of your throat. Black peppercorns provide a sharp, earthy bite that balances the bright acidity of the vinegar. Here is a massive myth to bust right now. Never use ground spices in your pickling brine. If you add mustard powder or ground black pepper, your liquid will turn into a dark, muddy, gritty swamp. You always want to use whole spices. When they swim around in the hot liquid, They slowly release their essential oils without ruining the visual appeal or texture of the brine. Think of whole spices like slow-release flavor capsules. When you eventually bite into a pickle and happen to catch a whole mustard seed, it pops with a tiny explosion of floral heat, adding an amazing surprise element to the eating experience. You can also add coriander seeds for a citrusy note if you are feeling adventurous. There is one ingredient that confuses a lot of beginners, and that is sugar. When people hear we are making savoury, salty, garlicky dill pickles, they are shocked when I tell them to add a spoonful of sugar to the pot. It is a myth that adding sugar automatically makes sweet pickles, like bread and butter chips. In a savoury recipe, we are using just a tiny amount of sugar as a flavour balancer. Vinegar is incredibly sharp and aggressive. Without a little bit of sweetness, the acid can be totally overpowering and harsh on the palate. By dissolving just 1 or 2 tablespoons of white sugar into our boiling liquid, we take the jagged, sharp edge off the vinegar. It acts exactly like adding a pinch of salt to a chocolate chip cookie. The salt makes the chocolate taste better, and here the sugar makes the vinegar taste smoother. It rounds out the entire flavour profile, making the pickles highly addictive. You will not taste sweetness. You will just taste perfectly balanced, professional-level harmony. Now we arrive at the absolute holy grail of pickling, which is the secret to an earth-shattering crunch. Nothing is worse than a soggy pickle. To prevent this, you need to understand a little bit of botany. Cucumbers contain an enzyme that specifically breaks down pectin, which is the cellular glue that keeps the vegetable firm. Where is this enzyme located? It is concentrated entirely at the blossom end of the cucumber. If you leave the blossom end attached, those enzymes will literally march through your jar and turn your crisp snack into mush. Therefore, you must always slice off about a 1/4 inch from the tip of the cucumber that originally had the flower. Sometimes it is hard to tell which end is which, so the safest bet is to just trim a tiny bit off both ends. This simple knife cut is the greatest insurance policy you have against soft pickles. Imagine cutting a wire to stop a ticking time bomb. By removing those tips, you are deactivating the softening enzymes forever. There is a second, ancient secret to guaranteeing crispness, and it involves something called tannins. Tannins are naturally occurring astringent compounds found in tree bark, tea leaves, and certain plant leaves. When tannins interact with the pectin in the cucumber skins, they reinforce the cell walls, basically building a microscopic suit of armour around your vegetable. For centuries, grandmothers have been slipping a fresh grape leaf, an oak leaf, or a cherry leaf into the bottom of their pickle jars to provide these magical tannins. If you do not have a grapevine growing in your backyard, do not panic. I have a brilliant kitchen hack for you. You can simply drop half of a plain black tea bag into the jar. Black tea is loaded with tannins. The tiny amount of tea will not affect the flavour of your garlic and dill at all, but it will work behind the scenes to keep those cell walls incredibly rigid. It is an amazing scientific trick that guarantees a loud snap when you bite into it. Let us talk about how to actually cut your cucumbers, because the shape you choose dictates how fast you get to eat them. If you leave the cucumbers completely whole, they look beautiful, but they will take at least a week or 2 for the flavour to penetrate all the way to the centre. Since we want fast results, we need to increase the surface area. The classic shape is the spear. By cutting the cucumber in half, and then into quarters lengthwise, you expose the soft, porous interior directly to the acidic liquid. Spears will be wonderfully flavourful in just 24 hours. But if you are in a massive hurry and want pickles for a hamburger tonight, you should slice them into thin chips or coins. Thin chips absorb the vinegar, salt, and garlic almost instantly. They will be ready to eat in as little as 2 hours. Think of it like drying a heavy winter coat versus drying a thin t-shirt. The thinner the material, the faster the process works. Choose your cut based on your timeline. Now it is time to assemble our equipment. For this quick refrigerator method, you absolutely must use glass jars with tight-fitting lids. Mason jars are the gold standard. You should never, ever make pickles in cheap plastic containers. The boiling hot vinegar will react with the plastic, potentially leaching dangerous chemicals into your food and ruining the taste with a weird synthetic flavour. Plus, plastic absorbs odours. If you make garlic pickles in a plastic tub, that tub will smell like garlic until the end of time. Glass is completely non-reactive and pure. Before you begin, you must wash your jars thoroughly in hot, soapy water. Even though we are not doing a long-term canning process that requires pressure cookers, starting with a squeaky clean jar prevents any rogue bacteria from ruining your bat in the fridge. Think of your glass jar as a sterile operating room. The cleaner it is, the safer and longer-lasting your delicious culinary creations will be. Packing a jar is an art form in itself. You do not want to just loosely toss the ingredients in. You need to build layers strategically. Start by placing your smashed garlic cloves, your bruised fresh dill, your mustard seeds, peppercorns, and your tannin sauce right at the bottom of the empty glass. By putting the aromatics at the bottom, they will not float up to the surface and get exposed to the air. Next, you need to pack your cucumber spears in as tightly as humanly possible. You want to play a very aggressive game of kitchen Tetris. Wedge them in so securely that if you were to turn the jar upside down, nothing would fall out. Why is this so important? Because cucumbers are mostly water, which means they naturally want to float in the salty liquid. If they float to the top and stick out above the liquid line, they will dry out and spoil. Packing them tightly locks them down securely under the surface, ensuring every millimetre of the vegetable is protected by the acid. With the jar perfectly packed, we move to the stove to create our liquid gold. The standard golden ratio for a quick brine is exactly 1 part water to 1 part vinegar. For example, 1 cup of pure water mixed with 1 cup of white vinegar. To this mixture, you will add 1 tablespoon of pure salt and 1 tablespoon of white sugar. Put this pot on the stove and crank the heat to high. You want to bring this mixture to a rolling, aggressive boil. It is vital to stir the pot continuously until you can clearly see that every single grain of salt and sugar has completely dissolved into the liquid. If you do not dissolve them fully, they will sink to the bottom of your jar, and your flavour balance will be completely ruined. The boiling process also sanitizes the liquid and creates the intense heat necessary for the thermal shock we are about to apply to the raw vegetables. Keep your face slightly away from the pot, because boiling vinegar creates fumes that will clear your sinuses instantly. Here comes the most critical step, the thermal shock. A lot of old recipes tell you to boil the cucumbers inside the liquid. That is a massive mistake and a myth that needs to die. Boiling cucumbers literally cooks them, turning them into soft, mushy vegetables. Instead, we are going to leave the cucumbers raw and cold inside their glass jar. Then, we are going to take the furiously boiling liquid straight from the stove and carefully pour it directly over the cold, packed spears. This creates a sudden, intense thermal shock. The immediate heat instantly penetrates the skin, killing off any surface bacteria and waking up all the spices at the bottom of the jar. But because the heat dissipates quickly as it hits the cold glass and cold vegetables, it never actually cooks the inside of the cucumber. It is just like jumping into a hot sauna and then immediately jumping into a freezing cold plunge pool. It shocks the system, locking in the vibrant green colour and ensuring that the interior remains raw and incredibly crunchy. Once you have poured the hot liquid all the way to the very top, leaving just about a ½ inch of space below the rim, you need to screw the lid on tightly right away. Now, you must practice patience. You cannot put this boiling hot jar directly into the refrigerator. If you put hot glass into a freezing cold fridge, the glass could shatter due to the extreme temperature change, ruining your food and creating a dangerous mess. You also risk raising the ambient temperature of your fridge, which can spoil your milk and meat. You must let the jar sit on your kitchen counter at room temperature until it is completely cool to the touch. As the hot liquid cools down inside the sealed space, it actually creates a slight vacuum. You might even hear the satisfying pop of the metal lid pulling downward. This vacuum seal helps drive the flavors deeper into the vegetable tissue. This cooling process usually takes about 2 hours, and it is a crucial resting period for flavor development. When the jar is finally cool to the touch, it is time for the final phase. Move the sealed jar into your refrigerator. Now, I know the title of this video promised a 10-minute recipe, and the actual work truly does take only 10 minutes. But physics and chemistry demand just a little bit of time to work their magic. While you technically can eat them right away, they will taste like raw cucumbers with hot vinegar. You need to let them chill in the dark cold of the fridge for a minimum of 24 hours. The cold temperature slows everything down, firms up the cellular structure of the cucumber, and allows the garlic, dill, and salt to completely harmonize. If you try to eat a warm one, it feels completely wrong. The true joy of this recipe is pulling a frosty, ice-cold, dripping spear straight from the fridge the next day. The crunch will be so loud, it will echo in your kitchen. Patience for just one single day is the final ingredient for perfection. The beauty of this method is that it is highly customizable. Once you master this base recipe, you can easily create incredible flavor variations. Are you a fan of spicy food? It is incredibly simple to turn this into a blazing hot snack. Just slice up a fresh jalapeno, or if you are feeling very brave, a habanero pepper, and tuck it in between the cucumber spears before you pour the hot liquid over them. The boiling vinegar will strip the capsaicin, which is the chemical that makes peppers hot, right out of the pepper, and infuse it entirely into the brine. You can also throw in a heavy pinch of crushed red pepper flakes. The result is a snack that starts off cold and refreshing on your tongue, and then slowly builds to a fiery, addictive heat in the back of your throat that makes you want to reach for a cold beer. You can also experiment by adding sprigs of fresh rosemary, slices of sweet onion, or even chunks of raw carrots to the jar. Let us quickly discuss shelf life and safety, because it is important to know the limitations of what we just made. Because we did not use a professional pressure canner to sterilize and vacuum seal the jars for long-term room temperature storage, these are strictly refrigerator pickles. They must live in the fridge at all times. They will never be shelf-stable in a dark pantry. However, because they are submerged in a highly acidic salt solution, they will last an incredibly long time in the cold. A perfectly prepared batch will stay crisp and delicious for up to 2 full months in your refrigerator, though I guarantee you will eat them all way before then. The only way they will spoil early is if you introduce bacteria. Never fish a pickle out of the jar with your dirty fingers. Always use a clean fork. If you ever see a fuzzy layer of mold growing on the surface, or if the liquid turns violently bubbly and smells like bad gym socks, throw the entire thing in the trash immediately. Finally, let us talk about how to use these magnificent creations. Eating them straight out of the jar at midnight in front of the open fridge is a perfectly acceptable lifestyle choice. But they are also incredible culinary tools. Chop them up finely and mix them with mayonnaise, a squeeze of lemon and some capers to make the absolute best homemade tartar sauce you have ever tasted for fried fish. Slice your chips and pile them high on a perfectly smashed, greasy cheeseburger. The sharp, bright acidity will cut right through the heavy fat of the beef and cheese, perfectly balancing the sandwich. You can even use the leftover juice. When all the cucumbers are gone, do not pour that liquid gold down the drain. Use it to marinate chicken breasts before grilling, or mix a splash of it into a potato salad to add an unbelievable tangy zip. You have not just made a snack, you have created an entire arsenal of flavour for your kitchen. And there you have it, the ultimate secret to crunchy, perfect pickles in just a few minutes of actual work. We completely destroyed the myth that you need to wait weeks for fermentation. We unlocked the science of tannins and enzymes, and we proved that you can beat the supermarket brands with a few simple ingredients. The realization that you can preserve the summer harvest and create massive flavor in a single afternoon changes everything about how you look at the vegetables in your crisper drawer. You are no longer just cooking, you are mastering culinary science. Thank you so much for watching and learning with me today. If this video blew your mind and made your mouth water, please hit that subscribe button, give the video a big thumbs up, and share it with a friend who loves to cook. Now, I want to hear from you. Are you going to stick to the classic garlic dill, or are you going to throw in some fiery jalapenos to spice things up? Drop your custom flavor ideas in the comments below, and let us get a conversation started.